And we're live. Hello, all, and welcome to Sigil Spotlight. My name, as always, is Mr. Harlan Guthrie, and I am here with the fantastic Ellen Abolt. How you doing, Ellen?
Good. How are you?
Pretty okay. It has been a hot week, I think, for the world. I feel like literally every person I talk to, no matter where they are, has been like, yeah, this week has been sweltering. And then my Australian friends, it's been freezing, so it kind of all bounced there.
It's been really hot and humid.
Yeah, so humid. What's up with all the global warming, eh? I wasn't going to do a laugh, but then a boo sounded too bad. So either way, it's a shitty place, but not here, not on Sigil stream. We're going to just pretend that doesn't exist for the moment and hang out. We have a special guest today. However, it is not who the description details. We were originally meant to have Mari Murdoch on today. Unfortunately, she had to pull out at the last minute, but we do have a special guest who we are excited to talk about. Someone who we had on our first episode, actually. Mr. Eugene Marshall will be on in a little bit. That's right, audience. Eugene. They're all really there, by the way. They're all just sitting behind. They have to come in every week behind Ellen's desk, behind my desk.
Yeah, it's a whole thing. You know, got to get the chair set up. Yeah.
Gotta get the chair set up. But yeah, so we're really excited about that. But before we get to that, obviously some news. And you'll notice Ellen has a new background. Ellen, what happened?
I moved. So this is, so we're not fully unpacked yet. So things will probably still move around in the coming episodes. But yeah, we're in the new house.
Well, congrats. It looks awesome. Obviously moving is stressful, so I'm glad that it is over with.
Yeah.
It's time for today's show. And then you can get back to your gaming and all that kind of stuff ASAP, which is the most important thing nowadays, really. That's all I care about.
Yeah, computer setup, day 2.
That's right. So today, again, like I mentioned, it's going to be a bit of a special episode. We're going to call this sort of an any special. And if you don't know what the any's are, we're going to talk about it in just a second. And our guests will too. But again, like I said, news. What is new, Ellen?
We've got a lot of stuff, actually. So VTT, I can't officially announce it yet. But we have some very exciting stuff coming up, and I can leave you with the word Pathfinder. And if you want to be,
now I can do it.
Yeah, and if you want to be the first to know about when that comes out, you should make sure that you are signed up for the Pinnacle Entertainment Group newsletter, which comes out every Tuesday. And we have other things in progress as well in VTT, so there'll be future announcements as we go.
That's right. So obviously all of us, especially moving to the online gaming, which we did during COVID the last few years, have become really familiar with VTT, myself included. And there's lots of stuff that's coming up for all of your different types of games and all that kind of stuff. And Pinnacle's an awesome company anyway. You did say Pinnacle, right?
Yep, Pinnacle Entertainment. They're the people who do Savage Worlds is the huge one, but they do a lot of other really good stuff as well.
Deadlands.
Yep.
Didn't they just have like a 25th anniversary of Deadlands celebration or something like that?
Yes, I don't know if that has happened yet.
I thought I saw Shane Hensley is the guy behind all that, and I thought I saw him visiting. So I am under the impression it happened. I'm sure it went off without a hitch. I'm sure it was an absolute blast. So for anybody who went to that, or anybody who loves Deadlands, congratulations on 25 years of the Wild West. Yeehaw! Have you played it?
I have not. It's on my list. I've worked on the actually Sigil's VTT productions for it, so I've read a lot of the rules now, but I haven't played it yet.
It's fun. I gotta say, it's one of my favorite combat mechanic games from what I remember. Because like every time you roll a 10, I think, or a natural 20 or something, anytime you roll the highest, it explodes and you get to roll again. It's just like has this like really cool cumulative effect. I'm probably remembering that wrong, but regardless, the thesis of my statement is it's a great combat system, and I'm sure that holds up. So check it out if you haven't.
Yeah, it's on my list.
Also in news, for S5E, hopefully tonight, we'll say tentatively, but there's a pretty good chance if you are a Kickstarter backer of S5E, we will be releasing the text-only version of the core rulebook to playtest. It'll be in PDF and hopefully available tonight. So if you are just as excited as I am, that's right, super amped about that. I have been playing it for the past 11 weeks. It is such a great game. It makes you feel like a superhero. but also still has the weight and sort of reality of a great 5th edition game. You know, it doesn't make you feel inconsequential, which I think is really tough when a powerful, when a game makes you feel powerful. So that will be coming most likely tonight. Refresh your Kickstarter or check your email later to see if it's there.
And if you want some sneak peeks before that, there's a couple of powers and stuff that have been shared on our Discord.
Yeah, that's right.
Very exciting stuff.
Go check it out there.
We get to see more in the back channels. There's just so much.
And plus, you can also see a lot of those powers in use on our weekly S5E game, which I am running. It is now every Tuesday at 7 o'clock. We are on chapter 9 this week, I think, coming up. So we're almost done. It's going to be a 10-part series. We're working up to a big finale, and honestly, I'm actually really proud of it. I think it's a really fun game. You know, there's a few episodes there of intense combat, and there's some great role playing by the cast. Really introspective scenes where they talk about how they got their powers. And last episode ended with a big reveal, which is actually turning out to be a much better campaign than I thought on myself. Not the material. You know how it is sometimes. You're always like, I don't know if this is going to be as good, but it's really fun. So make sure you check that out again on the Sigil's YouTube or the Twitch channel if you want to Twitch. A lot of people Twitch. I don't, but I mean, I Twitch sometimes.
Yeah.
Really itchy. But what other news do you got?
Let's see. I think that's a lot of what we have for right now. There's a lot of as always, there's a lot of stuff that's cooking, but it's not ready yet.
A lot of stuff in the oven, but it's easy bake, so it's a light bulb there. It is taking a long time. No, but if you know any artists, or if you're an artist yourself, you know how a lot of this stuff ends up happening. Plus, because so many of these tentacles are in other people's, hoods. You like that weird metaphor? I don't know what the hell I was going with that.
Yeah, that's like that.
I'm trying to go fingers and pies, but then I was trying to diversify it and ended up just being really weird. So let's just forget that. But obviously there's a lot of other companies that we want to make sure that we respect with our release dates and all that kind of stuff. So it's on them to let us know when we can be bringing it to you to a degree. But if that's it for news, I think it's time, and I am excited to introduce once again for the second time on the show, the one and only Mr. Eugene Marshall. Welcome to the show, my friend. How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Great. It is a great Friday. I'm feeling great. What's the weather like where you are? Is it sweltering as well?
Yes. Midwest.
Crazy, right? It's a superhero storm, I think. Everyone knows S5E is coming out, and they're making it.
Yeah, there's a villain behind this, I'm sure.
I hope so. Speaking of villains, we have some exciting villains coming up for you in not too long a time before you're going to be playing this S5E. Tonight, as we mentioned, S5E will be coming out with the text-only version. So you can be playing by this weekend if you want.
So get your costume designs ready.
That's true.
Costumes have you? I know, Ellen. I know you tend to be a Amy-esque stolen car riding your player type thing. Do you ever dress up as a character?
I have not.
Yeah.
I have. There have been a couple of things where we've gone and done Photoshop costumes for specific events on our characters. So we all have formal wear versions of our characters now. But I have never actually dressed up in real life for my character.
What about you, Eugene?
Sort of. So I've had props or small parts of a costume, like a cloak or a hat or you know what I mean? But I have not done a full head-to-toe cosplay of one of my original characters. In part, one reason being is that I often don't play humans, and I often also cross-play gender, so it would be more involved cosplay, wise. So I'm not a cosplay person, and I'd love to have a pro cosplayer fix me up, I haven't done it myself.
Stretch goal for the next Kickstarter. Get Eugene fully cosplayed.
I totally do it. 100%. I will dress up as your OC. How's that?
Yeah,
that'll be the backing level.
No, that's awesome. It's exciting. And I love the idea of being on a table with people who are dressed up too. I think it's really fun, whether you're a GM or whatever. However, and again, Elle and I were talking about this beforehand, you know, incorporating different people's play styles into your game is so clutch, and getting to play the way you want to play is the real heart of role playing. You know, telling someone they can and can't do something sometimes is necessary, but never when it comes to how comfortable they are at the table. And I think that really segues beautifully into what we kind of want to talk about today, so far as the Ennies coming up. And maybe before we get into what exactly that connects us with, which is your fantastic product, Eugene, which is exactly that, ancestry and culture, an alternative race to 5e, which really deals with some of the honestly, I think one of the ways that you can feel comfortable playing the game as well too, which is why I think it's such a wonderful product. But before we talk about that specific product, can you maybe give the people who don't know a quick overview of what the Ennies actually are? Because it could be nothing to a lot of people.
Yeah, so it's the closest thing the tabletop role-playing game industry has to like the Academy Awards or the Emmys, if you prefer, your media on a small screen. That is, they have awards for like best electronic book or best product of the year and best art and best cover and best layout and all the different kind of elements of a role-playing game book or product. They also have things like best like accessory, and so there's, you know, you can get like decks of cards or minis or whatever can be nominated as well. My book, Ancestry and Culture, has been nominated for 3 best electronic book, best supplement, and product of the year. Arcanist Press, the press that published it, is also up for fan favorite publisher, so that's 4. There's a bunch of other fantastic products nominated as well, though I could be happy to talk about, or I can talk a little bit about it. I guess I should say something about my product first, I suppose.
Well, that's it. And I wanted people to understand exactly why this is sort of an important thing, and honestly, what this episode is going to be a little bit more or less dedicated to. But yeah, so going on that sort of award system showcase, that's what it is. Yeah, why don't you tell us a little bit about what your product is? Well, we should say yours and Amy's product, and I guess Arcanist Press product more specifically, only because we don't want to limit anybody's appreciation of what you guys have done. But yeah, why don't you tell us a little bit about what that is, because it's really exciting.
So basically, our Ancestry and Culture, an alternative to race in 5e, is just what it says. It takes the race choice that you make in making a 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons character, and it substitutes, instead of one choice, elf, dwarf, human, gnome, or whatever, it's 2 choices. You first choose ancestry, which is like who your parents were, your biological heritage, and then you choose whatever, elf, dwarf, human, gnome, and then you choose your culture, where you grew up, and you can mix and match so that maybe you're a human ancestrally, like you have human parents, but you were raised by elves like Aragorn in Lord of the Rings, so you choose human ancestry, elf culture. Maybe you want to be Carrot Iron Founderson from the Terry Pratchett Discworld books, who is a human raised by dwarves, human ancestry, dwarf culture, and and you can imagine all kinds of permutations. What's nice about it is that it is super easy. All I did is I took the traits basically that were the elf race and I separated them into ancestry and culture, so that when you make these choices, if you choose elf ancestry and elf culture, you just get elf. It's just like you had just chosen elf race. So it doesn't actually change anything really importantly mechanically. It's quite familiar to anybody playing D&D, and thus super easy to implement at the table. You just have one extra choice. You're like, well, do I want to have a mix and match of ancestry and culture? I can if I want. And that, of course, is a super easy way to significantly diversify the kinds of characters you can play at the table, which is fun. On top of that, it takes out, and this is really the kind of political element of it that people are attracted to, it takes out some features that are currently in the D&D race category and takes them out of biology, because technically speaking, according to 5th edition rules, if you have one parent who's a half-orc, it doesn't matter what happens to you your whole life. It doesn't matter how you were raised. It doesn't matter anything. You grow up and you make savage attacks and you are menacing, right? Just for example. And that is problematic because it suggests that, like, simply because of who your parents might be, you're a savage person. Or if you're, you are a graceful, delicate, and intelligent person if you have high elven parents, right? So, is that racist or problematic? No, not by itself. But what it does do is it is a kind of overly simplistic, and I think we can do better. And it's easy to do better. It's not, you don't complicate anything by introducing these two choices.
Exactly.
And you take the essentialism out, right?
Yeah, and that's why it's such a brilliant sort of addition, because again, and I think had the time been and the thought, I'm sure 5e would have incorporated something similar, because I don't think it's meant to be that way. But as you put it, 100%, it is just something to make it more diverse, to give your character more range, to allow you to feel more in control of that, and also, potentially removing the fear that some players might feel when sitting down and having only the core rule book to sort of go through, because people are from various backgrounds themselves, and we want to make sure it's as safe and comfortable every time someone sits down to play as possible. So it's why it's such a wonderful product, and a huge congrats for you guys for putting it together, because I think it's really smart.
I think it immediately changes the conversation from, like, if you go and you look at the core rule book, it can feel like the world is very monolithic, like, oh, all of the elves live over here and stuff like that. And then even when you go read like the setting materials and they start talking about, like, this is a very multicultural city, it's like, but is it though?
Yeah.
Is it? All of the gnomes know gnomish. Is it really that multicultural? And then it's like, but this immediately changes the conversation to, like, no, like, this is something that would be applicable to all of your NPCs as well. Like, the world has to have this kind of multicultural element. It's just baked in now. And I think that's very cool.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Small short story here. That was the original concept for the product, right? I wanted to take out the essentialism by moving things like language and proficiencies and behavior into cultural traits instead of ancestral. Okay, boom, easy done. And now richer, more interesting characters. But then I discovered that it was also very easy, once I'd had that system in place, to present an optional choice of making a character of mixed ancestry. So, like, you have a gnome and a halfling parent, or an elf and an orc parent. And that it's just, instead of taking the 2 or 3 traits from ancestry of orc, you take one from elf and one from orc. And now you've got an orc and an elf parent. It's very easy to do. But what I discovered is both the original ancestry culture system and the mixed ancestry optional edition gives you the opportunity. It's very easy to do, but all of a sudden character creation has so much more narrative richness to it, right? So we've now gone from, okay, tell me about your character. Okay, they're an elf, and to, okay, well, my character has an orc parent and a gnome parent, but they were raised by dwarves. Like, already you're like, wow, tell me, how did that happen? Right?
Yeah.
Tell me about the world in which that the world had to be a certain way for that to be possible, right? So you already get so much more story in those choices. And that's actually the kind of accidental. That was not my design goal, but it ended up being a great effect. So I think a lot of people have picked it up, and for both, maybe, because let's face it, sometimes if you're the kind of person that goes out into the regular world and you encounter people often saying, like, oh, well, because you're Asian or white or black, that means you're this way, and that's kind of unpleasant to encounter. So then when they sit down to make a character, they're like, oh, I get it, I'm an orc, so I have to be savage, no matter whether I was raised by elves, or maybe I don't want to be savage and strong, maybe I want to be a gentle, intelligent orc. Nope, that's not really allowed. Or if it's allowed, but it's like the system you're fighting against the system to do it. Yeah. So, some people are like, I'd rather avoid that. And then you also get this big narrative flexibility and payoff. So that's, I think, why it resonated with a lot of people.
Yeah. No, it's a very cool product.
No, absolutely. And exactly. I think coming from that sort of core rulebook mentality, and I'm wondering, what would you say to somebody, who, we have purist players who say, player's handbook +1 type thing, that they don't really allow anything on their table beside that. And obviously that's a play style and they're welcome to do that. But how do you sort of deal with people who say, well, it's not official Wizards, I don't really, do you have sort of an easy answer for that sort of encompasses more of these sort of materials?
I'd give two types of answers. The first is a general one, which is first. I mean, as you say, well, okay, that's fine. If at your table you and your players are all communicating your wishes to each other, and everybody wants to have that attitude, great, right? Because if there's one thing that Jeremy Crawford has been, the lead rules designer for 5th edition, has been saying more than anything else since 5th edition came out, which is like, he's like, just like, follow your joy. Like if you want to change the rules or play it a certain way, you do that. If that works at your table, you do it. So what that means is if there's open communication going on, no particular play style is, and everybody's consenting and comfortable, then whatever play style you prefer is fine. Now, if somebody wants to say, if somebody's asking me, okay, I get that, but like maybe give me a pitch for why I should take yours seriously or something, given that I normally don't like to do that. Well, then I'd ask, well, have you checked in with your players about this as an option? Because you know what? Some of them might actually prefer this. Some of them might feel more comfortable with it. And so this is an optional rule, just like whatever, flanking, you know, as one of the optional rules in the DM's guide. Just if you want this as a tool that we made available for people who would prefer to have these flexibilities, as well as people who want to try and avoid this like totally leaning into the racial essentialism. And if it's a GM particularly, I might say, well, like, look, why don't you make this option available? Because the onus shouldn't be on the players to come to you to ask to be included, to feel included, right? It should be the GM's, in part of the GM's job when at least setting the game up, to like institute kind of comfort and consent. I mean, you know, like S5E, for example, to segue for a moment, not only incorporates ancestry and culture when you make your hero, you don't just choose alien, mutant, human. You choose like, well, what ancestry? Were you born a mutant? Were you born an alien? Because after all, guess what? Not only do, just as all of our favorite fantasy stories, it's actually kind of funny that they haven't, this is what I think that I'm a little surprised that somebody hadn't put an ancestry and culture system into D&D before, because so many core fantasy stories that we all love are about these like fish out of water, mix and match stories. So are superheroes, right? Like Superman is an alien raised in a human culture, right? Some of these are mutants raised in human culture. Some of them are robots. Some of that are raised in, you know, Star-Lord is a human raised in an alien culture, right? So like
examples as we were making our characters during S5E campaign, that's exactly what we were like. And it's funny because I didn't realize really that the ancestry and culture was incorporated into S5E. I just thought, oh, wow, this is a unique way to do the background system. And now I see how it's been retrofitted in a way to like also apply to this. And it was so important. And almost to put it into perspective for anybody who's watching and maybe even on the fence on something like this, which you really shouldn't. But if you are, almost every single one of the players at the table went with a different ancestry and a different culture than the one that they would have been prescribed, because it was so much more beneficial to be like, okay, yeah, a human with an alien artifact would sort of make them more of like an alien than a human. And, you know, a superhero who grew up in a family of superheroes but is still human isn't going to have a regular human background either. They're going to have like a lineage behind them. And it made it so much easier to immediately encompass their characters. And anytime a mechanic gives more, as you said earlier, more narrative freedom and more importance to your background, or a place for you to feel like you can talk about it more easily, it is an absolute win. That is really the goal of role-playing, to get you to be able to feel like your characters matter more into a story.
Yeah. And then as a designer, my job is to make it that happen, but in like an elegant or streamlined way. So it's not, you know, awkward or like super, you know, you reduce the friction points as much as possible. So it's easy to choose. And that's why, ideally, at least, oh, yeah, I'm a dwarf raised by elves. It's supposed to be like, oh, that's not complicated. I don't need to do math to sort that out.
And
3/16 dwarven, but from this other clan, I've got 1/16, and then there's
and so that's my 27 points are thus divided. That's 9. And, you know, no.
And you know, if you and going back to the Ennies, for those watching and curious, supplements like these or books like these are really important. And I think there's a great deal of responsibility to a degree from us as players, if you watch something like this or you read something like this and you say, that I see the benefit of that, but maybe I don't want to use it in my game. That's okay. But I think having something like this be awarded or rewarded in a way that brings it to a more popular place is important, because what it is saying is that things like this that might make people feel more comfortable at the table or more comfortable with the way they get to play the character, it tells the higher ups in Wizards of the Coast or anything that stuff like this matters. And I think there's a real responsibility for us as GMs and players alike to start trying to promote more things like this so that they come through on the bigger stuff, so that there's more responsibility at the front end to do, read throughs and be more sensitive and all that kind of stuff, because it is a genre of games, role-playing games in general, need to be more inclusive. They need to continue striving for that. And the great companies out there that are doing it, that are trying to make a difference, are the ones that I think are doing good for this. And hopefully that'll come through at the back end for 6th edition or whatever it's coming next.
Even if you decide that you don't want to include it in your game, reading those kinds of supplements is still really interesting for your own, I guess. I don't know how to make this not sound super pretentious, but like your own role-playing practice. Like it introduces new thoughts and new ways to think about it. It might spark new ideas for characters or campaigns. Even if you never actually use the raw mechanics, like I have world-building books from game systems that I don't play because I'm interested in how they build the world and the like random little story hooks and things like that they have. So it's always worth going and like looking at that stuff again, even for systems that you aren't interested in.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just like, even if you're just a D&D only person, I mean, like, if you haven't, go read the Eberron world books, because one thing that they do really well is kind of subvert some tropes. So you've got like halflings, like some of these halflings are like these like wild barbarian dinosaur riders. And then there's like a nation, like a real functioning nation that has diplomacy with all the other nations and its citizens are like goblinoids, like orcs and trolls and, but so like these are people that and that game and with that element, it came out almost 20 years ago, 15 years ago. So it's those are great alternatives, and I just found myself as a GM over the many years enjoying subverting lots of those tropes. So like in the last game I ran for my kind of home group, we went levels 1 to 20. Took us 3 or 4 years. We did the whole thing, and one of their all their most beloved NPCs were these trope subversions, like the gentleman orc, like moneylender, right? And whose name been named by his parents, more, let's say, conservative orc. So his name was Snot, but he was Snot, the moneylender, but he was the most like dignified person in the city. So I mean, that's just fun. It's so much fun to just be like, yep, it's another. I mean, we all can pick up a random video game and play through the banging away at killing orcs or whatever, and it's I think it's lazy.
It has its place, don't get me wrong, but
it does.
It's nice to have those other options. And reading some of those other supplements and things like that is a fantastic way to explore some of that.
And it's so different. I mean, again, and going back to sort of pushing the ball forward for people, and changing these tropes and talking about alignments and all that kind of stuff, which we should talk about in a second. But, it's important because a lot of these old modules, I ran, or even, you look at like Ghosts of Saltmarsh, which is sort of like an amalgamated version, the new of the older modules. They really have this expectation from the 70s and 80s where a band of orcs comes upon you and you kill them flat out. Like alignment, it was meant to be very clear cut in the old days. You see a goblin, it's going to be something you fight. And now with a lot of the new materials coming out for 5e and similar things like this, they're making you question alignment. And so many more players are realizing that a lot of these interactions for newer games have like an element of research first, which makes the game more diverse, where you're like, okay, there's a band of goblins around a fire. If this mod, and literally when we play games, I go, is this module written in the 80s or is this like a new one? It's like usually the first time. Because if it's an 80s module and there's a band of goblins who are in a fire, perfect. Let's take the advantage. Let's attack them all. If it's more recent, then it's like, cool, let's listen to them for a bit and find out if they're actually good people or bad people. And personally, I much prefer the newer way because it adds more depth to the combat and to the game. If I get a chance before attacking to actually try to understand the motivations of these things because alignment is starting to go out the window, then a character who might not be as useful in combat suddenly becomes so much more useful in a more intrigue sense. You know, you have spaces for people to play characters that aren't just barbarians.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think that when I design an adventure, which I don't do as often as system stuff, but when I do, or when I just am running a game, or when I'm playing a game, what I enjoy most is being presented with a situation, not like a programmed algorithmic, like insert sword here and to gain 300 experience or whatever. It kind of takes the fun out of it, right? This is actually a comic from Dragon Magazine in the 80s I just described, but or early 90s maybe. Anyway, but I like, my favorite thing to do as a player and to see as a GM is to, like, there's a situation, there's any number of ways of approaching this. And I just it's like, put it out there and like, well, I don't know what the players are going to do. Let's find out. I mean, there's so many different ways they could do this. And then they inevitably surprise you. And it's just a lot more fun. That's like what makes role-playing games better than video games is they can
100%.
just program. Like if it's just about killing monsters, I can do that in a video game and it's almost identical to just killing monsters in D&D, right?
Yeah.
But what's great about D&D is you can come across that band of goblins and in a video game, well, they only programmed in kill them, sneak past them, cast a spell on them so that they fall asleep or whatever. They give you the 5 or 6 options, but inevitably creative players are going to be like, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to lay 10,000 ball bearings in the hallway.
Yeah.
And then we're going to use thaumaturgy to make a bunch of noise. Like they come up with some like, what? Okay, let's see if it works, or they go in and we're going to pretend to be salesmen who are selling the goblins real estate or something. You're like, okay. And that's what's so much fun about role-playing games. So treating these people or these creatures like, at least some of them, like they're the kinds of creatures you can, interact with in any number of ways. It's just so much more fun.
Absolutely.
Yeah. No, it absolutely is. I mean, so we had the very first thing we did in our campaign was we were exploring a kobold cave, and it ended up with several of us trying to impersonate kobolds for a dance contest. And we still have one of the kobolds is still a beloved NPC, something like 2 years later. But we also in the campaign have room for, okay, guys, I'm wiped. I don't want any moral quandaries. I do want to hack and slash this time. Please just tell me they're evil. And it's
I've done
nice
that.
to have both.
I have had that where I'm like, look, and I think it's Curse of Strahd. There's an enemy in Curse of Strahd near the beginning. I don't remember their name, so no spoilers. But it's sort of like an underling in one of the towns. And I remember it was a duet game where my partner was running, and which we do a lot. I'll play 1 or 2 or 3 PCs, and she'll be the GM. And I remember just being like, trying everything, persuasion, deception, intimidation, whatever. And I just ended up being like, look, is this a person that I can persuade? And, she absolutely had the option to be like, well, I could fudge it that way. But part of the reason we run for modules when the two of us, it's kind of a pickup game. It's kind of like, hey, do you want to play later tonight? And and don't get me wrong, when you're a GM and you have 8 hours to prep or you're planning next week, of course, have the freedom on the fly and stuff but when you're after work and all you want to do is play some games, modules are great for that. You pick it up, all you have to do is read it and go on the fly. And she's just like, there's literally, it says there's no way you're supposed to, this is just an encounter. So I'm like, perfect. I fire my bow. Sometimes it's great just to be told, unfortunately, this isn't something it's just going to be a hack and slash through here. And we had John Wick on last 2 weeks ago, and he talked about the dread peril rule a little bit, where it's like going into a scenario knowing that you have the chance to die versus you're fine. And there's almost a similar thing to be said about that, this town, no one in this town is unquestionably going to attack you. You know what I mean? I'm not advocating people do that, but it could be an interesting idea.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I mean, go ahead. Sorry, Ellen.
Yeah, it comes back to, this is like a common theme of like establishing expectations with your players of like, okay, like, and it goes beyond, you know, what genre are we playing, but it's, you know, are we using the ancestry and cultural rules? Are we doing, you know, are we talking in the third person or in the first person for our characters? Are we dressing up as our characters? Like it all comes back to that of, you know, establish the game that you're playing, and it's all good as long as everyone's playing the same game.
As long as
it's all
everyone's on the
fine.
same, exactly.
Yeah, and that's another thing that's kind of amazing about role-playing games. Like if you sit down and play even a like allegedly radically open world sort of game like Skyrim or something, and I sit down and play it, it's pretty hard to get around the fact that we're having pretty similar experiences.
Yeah,
even
you're gonna go find the same stuff.
Right, even though you go whatever, Assassin's Brotherhood, is that in Skyrim too? I know
That's
that was
one
in
of them.
Oblivion and all the other earlier ones. Whatever, you go one faction, I go the other. You go the Stormcloaks and I go the Empire or whatever. So we're going to have a different experience, but we're all the Dragonborns. We're all just having, you know.
Yeah.
But
We're all going to get 30 wheels of cheese.
Right? We're all going to get like
sweet rolls.
Hear about that guy getting shot in the knee 80 times, you know. But on the other hand, but when you have two different D&D game or role-playing games, tables, wow, it's like walking into the movie theater. You have without looking, you have no idea. Is this a comedy? Is this a horror? Is this a emotionally intense like soap opera? Because all of those can be a role-playing game, and some of the same tables can just like rotate among them in the same week or session even sometimes.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like, we'll frequently have sessions where it's like, okay, so half the session we're doing just a hack and slash, and now calm down and we're gonna come do a massive, like, I want the soap opera, guys, bring it. Like, bring your best telenovela voice. Like, and we'll do that in the same session, or it's like different every single week. We're, you know, pulling in those different elements, and like, so we can adjust to like how people are feeling, like on any given day.
And alternating between those pillars, you know, exploration and combat and like letting people know what they're feeling. Absolutely. We've been like, oh, there's role-playing episodes coming up, and be like, can we slide in a combat?
Yeah. Like, oh no, okay, I gotta get the coffee out. Like,
I will say that is one of the things that makes, in my mind, it's very hard I'd love to see somebody like say something intelligent and clear about it, because for me it's very vague, but what makes a really great GM is pacing. Managing pacing, right? So I'm as a GM myself, I definitely am more of a remixer. Like I take what the players have presented to me as evidence, that like they've given me signs that this is something they're interested in. Maybe because they put points in it on their sheet. Like, oh, I noticed that this guy put proficiency in animal handling. Okay, well, I guess I'm
going to throw in some animals,
right? You know, or whatever, right? You always like do that, right? And in unexpected ways, but. Man, it's like you can't just have combat. I think actually, now that I think about it, I think Robin D. Laws maybe has a book about this where he talks about the pacing of drama as different sorts of scenes kind of have ups and downs, and how to like think in those terms when you're DMing, right? Actually, I think it's his most recent book. Like, I don't remember. It basically talks in those terms, but role playing game terms, but mixed with kind of dramaturgical concepts. So I need to read it, I guess.
We always talk about it in terms of like TV seasons.
Mm-hmm.
And so we'll do like, because all of us have like radically different backstories, and so it's like, okay, this is your part of the season. Like, we're dealing with your backstory now, and like the rest of us still get like, you know, our episodes in there, but it's like this is this person's season. We're really digging into them. And so it's kind of interesting and fun to explore, like, from that perspective. And it also helps with like, oh, my character hasn't been getting a lot of screen time. It's like, well, yes, it's not your season. Don't worry, you're coming. Like, we're building your backstory. And
that's right.
Yeah.
It's this season when we learn about that guy's evil twin, and your issue with your parents are coming next. I mean, it's like a great example of TV is how they have the A plot and the B plot in a lot of shows.
Yeah.
And like the A plot involves all the characters, but the B plot you'll kind of like jump back and forth among which character's B plot is being emphasized that day. It's Hamlet's Hit Points, by the way, is the name of the book I was thinking of.
There we go.
Oh, is it? Cool. He's got another one called Beating the Story too.
That one is similar.
Yeah, cool. No, absolutely. And I think storytelling in this way and giving people different. It's a role of a great game master, and sometimes, as we all know, sometimes you're thrust into the game master role because your friends don't want to do it, and I think it's a great opportunity as a player too to also help carve those stories out and work with them. The amount of times that I've worked with game masters that in games that I'm working with just to bash around a story a little bit, it's sometimes it's just fun getting to tell those stories. But and going back to the Ennies, are there any? So again, this is the last day for voting. So if you are, on the fence or for any reason, stop it and go vote. Here's the link down here for the index, and
for sure,
I think you guys are best. I've already voted, so they're grayed out for me. But best,
I can tell you, best electronic book and best supplement and product of the year. Yes,
there you go. And I've also voted for Fan Award. I don't know what that's for. Fan Award. Oh, for Arcanist Press.
Yeah, that we're also up for best Fan Award for best publisher. Arcanist is also so.
That one you can do if you want. But you have to do the other ones. That's
right. Well, yeah.
Yeah, in other categories, if you're looking for stuff, Describe is another company that Sigil works with quite a bit. We do a lot of the map prep for them. Not the maps themselves, just prepping the maps with their box text. And they are also up for a couple of Ennies, which we're very excited for them.
Yeah, they're like best digital accessory and...
best digital accessory and what was
best online content, maybe? I think so.
That might be it. Yep, best online content.
We also have best adventures. I don't know if you know any of these guys. The Destroyer of Worlds was good, though. I liked that one.
Yeah. So Eyes Unclouded is by a bunch of great folks from the DMs Guild. That's a really cool set of adventures that are kind of inspired by Studio Ghibli, like Miyazaki anime. Oh. And then the Halls of the Blood King, the Old School Essentials one by Diogo Nogueira is really cool too. So there's a bunch of good stuff in there. I mean, there's so many good. So in the earlier iteration of Sigil Spotlight, back when it was me running games with my fellow creators in the early to mid 2000s, back in the first year of the pandemic. There was I played with Jessica Markram, and she has an adventure up for best organized play adventure called My Immortal Loneliness, which is worth looking at. And there's a lot of other great stuff out there too.
So basically, this is your shopping list for the year.
Yeah, depending on which ones win. Also, might as well shout out Best Podcast, Asians Represent, is a friend of ours, both Eugene and mine. Daniel Kwan runs this podcast with his friends and a few other really intelligent people. Highly recommend them. They won last year as well, and deservedly so.
Yeah, and they, Asians Represent, I mean, just a small note, Arcanist Press and Ancestry and Culture, I'm really honored that it's getting nominated. But I mean, to be clear, the work that book does is very much me standing on the shoulders of giants, of other people that have been in the industry for years, pointing out these problems and calling for them to be improved. I mean, I guess I just came up with a solution, but it's people like Daniel Kwan and Asians Represent, and the cast of Rivals of Waterdeep and Orion Black and all these other people that are advocating on the front lines as for improved inclusion and diversity that really deserve a lot of the credit. And so Asians Represent is a classic example of that. So they definitely are great.
And, Torontonians, at least I know two of them are. But as a fellow Canadian and sort of Torontonian, yay, Canada.
Indeed.
But yeah, so make sure you check it out. vote.any-awards.com/vote/2021. Again, you can find all of the fantastic people around here.
And today is the last day to vote. So don't just open the tab and then forget about it.
That's right.
Yeah, don't forget about it. Gotta get angry at people sometimes, not really, but I don't know. Some people respond, they like it, they're like, they want to be yelled at in a loving way. But no, check it out. So again, I mean, I think that is it for the most part. Eugene stepped in, really appreciate you stepping in. Mari did get back to us just after you joined, about 10 minutes into the episode. Unfortunately, her internet was down, power outage on the block, which is totally understandable. But because we also wanted to dedicate an entire episode to her and her products and everything that she's done, I asked her if she'd be happy to come on next episode. So next episode, we will have her on. We will talk about all the amazing things she's done. Because she deserves her own spotlight. And what a perfect day to talk about the Ennies being the last day for voting. So if you are still on the fence, stop it. Get out there, vote for the Ennies. It means a lot to the people who are doing this. And again, we want to see more products like this being created to give safer spaces for everybody, as well as just more options to play your game. And if you're somebody who doesn't like more options, well, that's silly. And if you're somebody who doesn't like safe spaces, well, stop, because you're being a dick. And you can go out and vote now today, and make sure you do it. Don't keep the tab open, as Ellen always does. She leaves me on read, as they say, too often. But that is it from us. I think we're not going to bother with the puzzle tonight because you've done the puzzle before and you nailed it, and it was classic. So again, join us next week, and that is it from us. Thank you so much for hanging out with us, and we will see you next time on Sigil Spotlight. Good night, everyone. Good afternoon, I should say.